Hello world, welcome back to the Razor RC, and we're doing the full review of the Serpent SRX8 RTR Nitro powered 1/8 scale race buggy. It's been out for about 6 months. I've had mine for about 3 months. A lot of people consider this to be the best RTR Nitro buggy you can buy, so we'll talk about that. Is it really the best? Fortunately, I do have quite a few number of other Nitro buggies. I got the Kyoshi Mp9 TKI4, I got the HPI Trophy 3.5, I got the Losi 8, I've got the Habao Hyper VS2, so very familiar with all the RTR Nitro buggies you can buy, so I feel like I have a good handle on what makes a good buggy or a bad buggy. The way the review works is we go through 6 different categories talking about all the different aspects of this vehicle, a little bit different than most other channels, and we give it a rating from 1 to 5 stars as it compares to those other vehicles. So 3 stars would mean average, doesn't mean it's a bad score, just means it's kind of typical within what you might typically find within kind of this higher end Nitro RTR buggy class. 5 stars would obviously be best in class, and 1 star would be worst in class. The Serpent SRX8 sells for a hair under $500 at the time of this video. We will have links in the description below if you want to pick one of these up. It does help support the channel. If you buy anything there, it does help support the channel, so that's kind of the best way. I don't really ask for Patreon or anything, but if you like this kind of content, that does help make it possible. So let's get into the review. Alright, first category is the engine and electronics, and the radio that comes with the SRX8 is the DTS3. It is made by Dragon RC, which I think is kind of like their house brand for their electronics. Nice foam wheel, actually feels pretty good. Decent trigger, takes 4 AA's, no external antenna, 2.4 gigahertz of course. Has a lot of adjustments, so all your steering and throttle reversing, your throttle trims, steering trim, as well as dual rates for those 2 things, but does not have endpoint adjustment, which is not a big deal on electric vehicles, but on a nitro vehicle you really need throttle endpoint adjustment. They don't have that, so I do think that is a little bit of a weakness. Personally, I use this just kind of for break-in, but after that I basically threw in my own Radio Link receiver because I just found it a little bit easier to use. Pulling off the body, here's what the vehicle looks like. Nice battery tray here. It takes kind of a flat pack with sort of modern style life or lipo pack, so that's something you will need to pick up. Serpent 0.21 cubic inch engine, 3.5 cc, so standard racing size. It is no longer a Nova Rossi engine. The older Serpent, I think the 811, came with a Nova Rossi engine. This is really more like a force-based engine. So Nova Rossi went out of business about a year or 2 ago. Kind of came back in another company, Nova Engines. I don't think it's exactly the same. There is a little bit of a relationship there, but yeah, basically Serpent switched over to a force-style engine. Really nice tuned polished pipes with the spring connectors there. A much more race-style pipe, really nice pipe, certainly best in class. You really don't find any other vehicles with that style of pipe, so I like that a lot. And then on the servo side, it's got the Dragon RC servos. Decent servos. They got, I think actually above average speed and torque. They're definitely not the weakest part of this vehicle. I would say the radio is probably the weakest thing. And then the engine, it does not seem quite as fast as some of the other brands out there. Now the Habao Hyper VS2 has a 0.30 cubic inch engine, so much bigger engine, not really race legal, but it does put out a ton of power. This one I would say is kind of an average engine. I think the servos are about average. I think the radio is actually a little bit below average, but I do like the nice tuned pipe. Other than that, kind of the way it's outfitted is okay. There's no battery included or anything like that. So overall in the engine electronics category, I think it's kind of average, right? This is kind of a nice premium style race vehicle, but it's still got kind of a budget RTR engine in there. Something you will get a little more power with is if you take off the pull start or change out the engine. You can get a little bit more power that way, but it is not quite as fast as some of the other vehicles out there. So in the engine electronics category, 3 stars. Nothing really bad, nothing really great, just kind of in the middle. Pull off the rest of the wheels here, and the design is based off the SRX8 race buggy, which was kind of like their high-end race buggy I think about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. It's been a few years now. They actually have the Cobra Pro, and I think they even had the SRX8 Evo after this one. So this is not the latest generation one, but it is actually pretty modern. I would say it's a lot closer to modern day race buggies than most other brands. So you can see what it looks like up top. Obviously, fuel tank in the front, 125 cc's. There's no pull tab or anything like that, but works totally fine. Now, mine actually had a cracked fuel tank out of the box. If you saw my first start video, I had to richen the vehicle a ton because I didn't realize at the time, but there's a tiny crack in this. It was leaking some air, so I had to richen a ton. Once I figured that out, it took me probably about halfway through braking to realize that the tank actually had a small leak in there. So I had to switch that out. That was just kind of one issue as it came out of the box, but otherwise totally fine. Has kind of a low-C style air filter, which I really like. Like we mentioned, the engine there kind of in the back, but it is a little more centralized than I think some of the older vehicles. So that's kind of an aspect of more modern buggies. They do centralize the weight a little more forward, a little more steering, higher traction vehicles in general. It does have these nice sort of copper colored outdrives and drive shafts throughout the vehicle, including the turnbuckles. They're really, really nice. I don't know if they're a different type of material, but certainly high quality looking. Nice machined shock tires front and back, all aluminum shocks front and back. It does have kind of that snap-on style with the plastic actual cap here that connects to the shock standoff. So that's kind of typical for some vehicles out there. Nice shock boots as well. A very durable wing, no issues with that. A lot of adjustments, obviously on all the shock tires, a lot of different adjustments for camber link locations, got sway bars, even locations here out on the hub. I don't think there are any inserts or anything for the pills, so you cannot adjust toe in or kick up or anything out of the box as is, but that's nothing too unusual. Looking at the front, same deal. You got the adjustable turnbuckles, adjustable steering links, the nice copper finished outdrives and drive shafts. Not super beefy. I'd say they're maybe like 4mm or so. Plastic C-hub style design, aluminum axles with aluminum 17mm nuts. Separate nose piece for the body there. A decent bumper there in the front. And then obviously dual disc brakes in the middle with your standard differential. So yeah, pretty nice little vehicle. The battery tray or receiver tray comes out with like 5 screws. Fairly easy to get to. Servos are a little bit more difficult to get to. It does have plastic servo horns on both the throttle and the steering side. And then, a little receiver box here in the back. Not a ton of room in the receiver box, but it does work okay. I did not like the power switch. Actually, it's really hard to tell if it's actually on or off. It just doesn't have that positive feedback. The battery tray, it's decent size, not too hard to use. A little bit better than the Habao actually, but not quite as nice as the Kyoshi in my opinion. Overall, design-wise, I think it's a little bit above average. Certainly more modern, easier to work on, does have the centralized style, does have the C-hub design. Just looks like a much more modern vehicle than some of the other RTRs that tend to be based on more like 10-year-old plus type vehicles. So design-wise, I'm going to give it 4 stars. It does not have any sort of quick release battery tray. The battery compartment is okay. It does have a little compartment here if you want to add a timing device. So that's nice overall. 4mm aluminum chassis here on the bottom, and then does have provision obviously for a starter box. But yeah, overall design-wise, I think this is above average. I'm going to give it 4 stars. Not a whole lot to really complain about. Servos are a little bit more difficult to get out than your other vehicles out there. The on-off switch is terrible. But other than that, yeah, pretty good design overall. Now, how does the SRX8 drive? It's excellent. This is probably the best handling buggy of all the ones I've tried. I think it drives better than the C8. I think it drives better than Kyoshi Mp9. Suspension works awesome. Shocks are super smooth. It's set up really well out of the box. I don't think you actually need to do too much tuning on this vehicle to get to drive the way you like it. I took it out to like a large BMX park, which is not exactly one that you scale track, but it's somewhere in between a basher style park and a racetrack, so works really well for testing out these RTR buggies. Just drives really well, neutral, very compliant on jumps and lands, even on those fairly large jumps, even on kind of a rough surface, pretty good traction. I think the tires work pretty well, more of a race style tread pattern, but you know, decent traction overall. I think they work pretty well, reasonably soft foams as well. So this vehicle in the performance category is pretty good. Really the only downside it had was that the engine is a little bit slower than some of the other brands out there. I actually switched to 25% nitro fuel when running the Serpent SRX8. My other buggies I typically run 20%, and I need that extra kick just to get enough speed to get as much power as those other brands. It actually gives it a little bit more power. So I would say, you know, the other brands on 20%, it's probably close to this thing on like 25%. So that's kind of gives you an indication on how much less power this thing has. It's not slow, it just doesn't have quite as much revs. It does not rev up quite as quickly as well as the other brands. And I think going up to you know, higher nitro content is something that'll get a little bit more power and make it a little bit more comparable. But otherwise, performance-wise, I really like this vehicle. I think it handles probably the best. You know, it's not got the best engine, and you know, maybe as an RTR, it's not quite as race ready as, you know, a full-on race kit, but the platform itself drives really close to what you would typically find with a race kit. Even something, you know, modern day, I think it's really close. So performance-wise, I'm gonna give it 5 stars. This is definitely one of the best vehicles out there in the way it drives. Kyoshi might be a little bit quicker, but I think probably doesn't quite drive quite as well. Needs a little more tuning. The hub out of the box has way more power, but also handles kind of the worst. So in the performance category, this is really close to being one of the best, if not the best. Handles amazing, just needs a little bit more power. Now, a lot of people think this is exactly the same as the kit version. It is not. A lot of the parts are definitely the same. The plastics, the fuel tank, you know, everything you typically see is the same as the kit version, but there are some differences. The shock tires are really nice. They're this gold colored anodization, but they are not the same. They are 6061 aluminum. They might be machined, but they are not the full-on 7075 kit parts. So you can see even on the shock tire, I did bend it a little bit. Now, not as bad as my Kyoshi. My Kyoshi, even though it's got thicker shock tires, I think it is actually weaker in one of the weaker parts of the vehicle. Chassis, I think, is 3 millimeters, but it does kind of slim down in some of these areas. You can kind of see it cut down there in the back, and while it's still, you know, pretty straight, I don't think there's any issues with it actually bending in half or anything like that. These ears actually are starting to bend, which affects your droop, which affects the way it handles. So this is not the 7075 kit part, and I think does not have as much durability as a 7075 piece, but that's kind of what you get with an RTR. They do kind of use cheaper metals on all the aluminum pieces, and that's why it's not quite as durable. But in the durability category, I think it is above average. I think the Kyoshi is a little bit worse than this. I think the Hubao is quite a bit better, but that is quite a bit more expensive and has 7075 parts. But this is a little bit better durability-wise than I think most of the other brands. While the shock tower did bend, while those ears on the chassis did bend, you can always upgrade to the kit pieces. You can always just kind of bend it back, whatever you want to do. But overall, I think the durability is pretty good. Didn't break any of the plastic parts. Nothing else really broke. The engine head didn't break like my low C did. So yeah, overall wise in durability, I'm going to give it an above average score. I'm going to give it 4 stars. This is one of the more durable RC cars you can buy in the RTR class. Not the most durable, and certainly not as durable as a kit version of any of those other brands, but still above average, and that's how we rank this thing. 4 stars. Now, Serpent is a little bit of a smaller brand. They've had some ownership changes over the years. In the US, I think the distributor is serpentamerica.com, so you can go check that out if you need any of these Serpent pieces. But certainly, parts-wise, most hobby shops are not going to carry Serpent parts. They are, you know, kind of a small brand, a little bit more European-based, I think, as well, and certainly a little bit bigger on the A-scale racing side. But you know, obviously, A-scale is not quite as big as 10 scale, so a little bit harder to find parts. Now, A-Main does carry most of the parts that you will need. That fuel tank that broke on me or was cracked out of the box, A-Main just took care of that. They are really good about that kind of thing, so I didn't have any issues. It was in stock, so no concerns there. The rest of the parts, I didn't really break anything, so I didn't really need to change anything out. But Serpent is definitely going to be a little bit more difficult to find parts than other brands. You'll either have to buy directly from the distributor, you have to buy from A-Main. For the most part, you're going to have to buy stuff online or stock your own parts, really, if you want to keep this thing up and running. So in the support and maintenance category, I'm going to give it 2 stars. It is below average. The good thing about the SRX8, it is very, you know, pretty modern compared to other RTR buggies, so it is easier to still find stuff in stock online. Some of the other brands like the Low C8 is really more based on the 3.0, which is like a 10-year-old design, a little bit harder to get parts. So even though Serpent is a smaller brand, for the most part, you know, you are still able to get parts, so no concerns there. But yeah, it is a little bit more difficult. You're gonna have to buy stuff online. You're gonna be waiting around for stuff to show up in your mailbox, so that's why I give it a below average score of 2 stars. But yeah, this is an excellent vehicle. Just support and maintenance wise, that's one of the weaker areas. The SRX8 Nitro RTR sells for $496.99 here in the US. That's pretty typical. I think it competes more with the Kyoshi Mp9 TKI4 rather than the budget, you know, Inferno Neo 3.0. I think it competes more with the HPI Racing Vorza 3.5 rather than the HPI Racing Trophy 3.5. So every brand kind of has, you know, their higher end version and their lower end version. The Serpent is definitely in that higher tier bracket, and price wise it is pretty comparable for what you typically find. They're all around $500. The Habao is closer to like $620, but that is a premium vehicle, has much nicer parts, 7075 machining, just a ton of goodness in the Habao vehicle. But this, you know, with the Kyoshi, with the HPI, is much more comparable, although I think you do get better parts. I mean, the pipe is a lot nicer, much more of a race style pipe. Engine, while, you know, not particularly fast, is pretty durable, pretty typical. I think the plastics are all pretty much kit parts. The metals and stuff may not be, but the, you know, machining on the shock towers, the shocks, everything is a cut above, you know, even the Kyoshi, which is a few dollars more. So in the value category, I think this is actually an above average value. Radio kind of sucks, so, you know, if you're relying on that, you can use it, but you know, certainly not the best. Body is full on Lexan. It is not PVC. It does have the clear windows and stuff. Wheels and tires are full on race tires. So yeah, value wise, this is definitely a good value. I'm going to give it 4 stars. You get a little bit more than what you pay for as compared to the other brands out there. You know, the Habao is quite a bit more expensive. The Kyoshi is a little bit more expensive, but maybe not quite as nice stuff. And then the HPI Racing is, you know, a few dollars more, but it's way lower grade, way lower spec in my opinion. Still even has the plastic shocks, whereas this has the full-on aluminum gold anodized shocks. So value-wise, that's one of the, again, the stronger parts of the Serpent SRX8. I'm going to give it 4 stars. It is definitely one of the leaders in this area. A lot of people consider the SRX8 to be the best RTR Nitro you can buy. Certainly price-wise, it is very competitive. Certainly quality-wise, I think it's also very competitive. One of the highest quality vehicles you can buy. In terms of how it's outfitted, yeah, the radio kind of sucks. I would say that's worth changing. Engine, it's okay, but you know, you definitely want to run 25 or even maybe 30% nitro fuel. Servos are okay, but always worth upgrading as well. I would say this is probably race ready out of the box. Here in the body, the tires, everything are pretty good. Is it as good as the Kyoshi? A lot of people are wondering, is the Kyoshi better? Is the Serpent better? Serpent is certainly nicer. You know, when you look at it, when you feel it, when you drive it, it drives excellent, a little bit better than the Kyoshi, but the Kyoshi is definitely faster. It comes with a much better radio, much better engine. Servos are pretty comparable, and it's only a few dollars more. So which one would be fastest on the track? I just think the Serpent drives a little bit better. This with the Kyoshi engine would probably be the ultimate package. Unfortunately, they don't make that, so I don't know which one would win in a head-to-head comparison. It probably depends more on the driver. I think the Kyoshi would be a little bit harder to drive, and you probably make more mistakes, but would be a little bit quicker, and certainly you could, you know, do those bigger jumps and stuff, whereas the Serpent is a little bit slower. So, you know, is the Serpent a great vehicle? Yes, I think it's excellent. Certainly one of the ones that considered it if you want to get into nitro. This engine is pretty easy to tune, you know, holds the tune pretty well. I think the radio is worth changing out. Otherwise, the vehicle is actually pretty good, but you know, with any sort of nitro vehicle or any ready to run, honestly, you don't have, you know, quite as much parts availability or ease of ownership with the Serpent as you would with a major brand like a Kyoshi. So overall, is this better than Kyoshi? Is this the best 1/8 scale Nitro RTR buggy? I don't know. We will have to do a shootout comparison between all those. I also want to try to get my hands on the HPI Vorza 3.5. I think that would be awesome to kind of do a forward comparison with the upper tier vehicles. I already have one on the lower tier budget 8 scale nitro buggies out there, so I'll put a link in the description below where you can click on that and check that out if you're curious on those other vehicles. And I do have full reviews on everything I've already discussed. So don't forget to hit the like, share, subscribe buttons. Look for more videos soon. Thanks for watching.